Good morning, welcome to my channel. It's been a little while since I've read your story, but I have another one for you today. And this will be story number 102. I've actually had 25 acceptances now, and you can find many of them in this book, Running Coyote and Fallen Star, which is available on Amazon. It's had some pretty good reviews. People seem to enjoy it, so if you do pick up a copy, please leave a review. Let me know what you thought. Anyway, I'm going to read you another story, as ever, based on 5 random words. And the 5 random words for this tale are... And the story is called Holloway. Everyone she'd asked, well, 3 friends and her brother Max, had told her the same thing. Do not get involved with your boss. It was such an obvious point, and yet one Leanne had entirely failed to accept. Dave had been so charming, so handsome, so supportive of her aspirations. He'd encouraged the creativity she'd never been able to explore before, and that simple act of really seeing who she was had won him her heart. Although Leanne was hired as a marketing manager at the influential cultural website Polymorph, she'd always yearned to flex her journalistic muscles. However, despite having scored the highest mark ever recorded for her 6th form composition about market dynamics in the music industry, Leanne had always been too shy to make the kind of contacts she'd need to enter the cutthroat world of proper journalism. However, 4 after-work drinks and 1 trip to Dave's Canada Water flat later, Leanne had been led to believe that the opportunity Dave was offering her to write an opinion piece on a V&A show about maternity was due to her latent talent, and not to the fact that she gave spectacularly good fellatio. Perhaps not as good as May Ella, it transpired. Leanne had swung by work on her day off to pick up the running shoes she'd forgotten the day before. Mission accomplished, she decided to surprise her partner with some pastries from the corner deli, heading downstairs in time to catch him fondling the website's fashion editor by the lifts. It later became evident that Dave had started sleeping with the younger woman just 6 months into their own relationship. When Leanne had found out about the infidelity, her boss/lover had tried to shrug it off. "Lee, we never talked about going exclusive," he said, not making eye contact while rearranging the trinkets on his cluttered desk. "I thought it was replied. It's kind of the norm," she said with pained sarcasm. "No, it isn't. Monogamy is so fucking bourgeois, Lee. It's totally 20th century. Sometimes Leanne forgot that Dave had yet to turn 30, whereas she was 3 months shy of 35. Dave was young enough to use the word bourgeois without irony. Their disagreement became a fully fledged shouting match as Leanne followed Dave out into the open-plan editorial room, then the corridor, lift and car park. All the while knowing she wouldn't win him back, and didn't want a selfish fucker in her life anyhow. She just needed her voice to be heard. And it was heard. By all her colleagues, by Dave's boss, by the sales and marketing department peering down from the 2nd floor to the car park below, where Leanne found a half-opened pot of paint belonging to a workman redecorating the railings. She stormed over to Dave's car, a new Tesla, still shiny in its showroom wax. "Leanne, don't you dare!" Leanne prized the lid off with her keys and, holding the bottom of the tin, hurled a crescent of red in the general direction of Dave's car. It painted a lopsided smile across the passenger door windscreen. She threw the tin down and ran, knowing she would never return. Her dismissal from the role she'd coveted came in the form of an email 3 days later, with a hard copy of her severance notification in the post 2 days after that. In that one explosion of rage, Leanne had cast aside her career aspirations, her misplaced love, and her sense of self. She felt a constant boiling rage at the injustice of it all, and returned to a habit she'd once loved, dawn runs around Ide, the Devonshire village where her parents' house was located. Mum and Dad were surprised, but happy to see her when she turned up, her ancient Ford Sierra loaded with possessions, for what she described as a chance to rejuvenate and reappraise. Each autumn morning she rose with the larks, donned her sportswear and headed out along the leafy country lanes, B-roads, drove roads and ancient rights-of-way that riddled the rolling countryside all around. She didn't always run far. Her tracking app revealed that her daily average was just over 3 miles. But she ran every day, as if the act of keeping moving would prevent the anger and frustration from burning her up inside. After 3 weeks of this, Leanne had almost exorcised the rage. But certain sights, sounds, and even smells still brought Dave and her foolish faith in him to mind. An advertisement featuring a male model whose chiselled cheeks vaguely resembled Dave's own. The snatch of a shared favourite song, Adele's cover of Dylan's To Make You Feel My Love, in the village shop. A woman passing with a perfume she now recognised belonged to May Ella and was clearly not a new aftershave Dave's sister had bought him. The dumb excuses she had unfathomably given credence to, it beggared belief. May Ella, what the hell kind of stupid name was that anyway? This morning she'd stomped through old puddles on Hawthorne Lane and was turning the blind corner under the railway arch when Leanne spotted some tasty-looking blackberries on a bush to her right, sprouting from the side of the embankment that carried the trains over the fields below. Suddenly Leanne craved the sweetness of the berries. She stopped to pick a few. They were delicious. Leanne didn't feel at all guilty for breaking her stride, especially when she spotted something unexpected amongst the bushes. A finger post, a wooden indicator of some forgotten trail, pointing along the side of the embankment. Dodging thorns, Leanne pushed back some of the briars and saw that there was indeed some indication of a narrow, heavily overgrown path leading into the dark green hollow beyond. Leanne felt her heart beating unaccountably fast, and a weird excitement filled her, like she'd uncovered something that someone had tried very hard to conceal. She couldn't resist exploring, and although she was bare-shouldered and wearing only her thinnest leggings, Leanne pushed through the bushes, ignoring the nettles which stung her ankles, the wet grasses that moistened her feet, and the thorns which plucked at her forearms. The pain of nature fighting back only encouraged Leanne as she ducked under overhanging branches and climbed a mossy, almost completely hidden stile into what was now clearly a Holloway, an archaic term for a deep ditch concealing a footpath, an ancient conduit from here to somewhere unknown. Leanne couldn't remember where she'd heard the word, but immediately knew that it was apposite. She also felt a creeping sense of dread. She really ought not to be here. It didn't feel safe. And yet, she observed herself still penetrating the musty gloom, still pushing through into the unknown. Surely nobody had passed this way for years, Leanne thought, seeing no signs of recent human intrusion. No discarded crisp packets or cider bottles, no mysterious garments or used condoms, nothing to indicate that anyone even remembered this place existed. The sun shone only intermittently through an arcing canopy of beeches and silver birch, with dense holly and ivy climbing the trunks. Chaotic branches crisscrossed the shattered fragments of a pale blue sky. Something like thin creepers dangled from mossy limbs, and sticky willow clasped at her calves as Leanne wandered up a shallow incline, which, if anything, became even narrower and darker. It was chilly in the Holloway, dank with a thick vegetable musk, like a cold soup that would prove much better for you than it tasted. There was an electric crackle in the cold, humid air, like it had been heavily ionized. Druids, thought Leanne absently. Druids made this place, or some mysteriously defunct people like them. The path was littered with heavily rotten logs where trees had given up their muddy anchors in rainstorms and tumbled into the lane below. She clambered, feeling insect-devoured bark crumbling and green lichen smearing her palms. She would be filthy by the time she escaped this place. Where on earth was it taking her? Leanne's heart was now racing with something she now recognised as an inchoate fear. Women meet their ends in places like this, their bodies found weeks, months, even years later. I'll be fine, she thought. This has to lead somewhere. Then a strange bassy throbbing seemed to mimic her own heartbeat, except this sound was coming from beyond her, from somewhere ahead. A machine of some sort? Perhaps there was a road. She should hurry. Leanne turned a corner, passing a tumble-down pile of old stone that might once have been a wall, from which a white-berried bush projected. Deadly nightshade? Do I even know what that looks like? I could eat some berries and all of this would end. The thought was ridiculous the second Leanne had it, pushing her way through yet another curtain of ivy. Wait, what was that? The path had widened and flattened, and there was suddenly far less underbrush, as if the place had been swept clean. Weirder still, the Holloway was partly fenced with thin birch branches woven around thicker uprights. This makeshift partition served no purpose other than decorative, since it extended only about 3 feet from the ground and ran for about 40 feet to what appeared to be a dead end. Thick bushes ringed a wider clearing at the end of the trail, rhododendrons or similar evergreens. And in this clearing was the source of the throbbing bass note that provided a counterpoint to Leanne's fear, a stone around 3 feet wide and 4 feet high, flattened on top like a trig point, but very crudely hewn, if it was man-made at all. It seemed unlikely to be natural, since the rock was so perfectly positioned, as if it was some kind of altar. And on that perhaps sacred rock something swelled, a wet reddish something that Leanne, creeping nearer in disgust, immediately recognised. A heart, a human heart. His heart. Lying in a thin pool of partly congealed blood, the organ magically throbbed out its dark note, while her lighter, pattering beat offered a fearful accompaniment. It wasn't a freaky apparition, however. It was anticipated, and somehow perfectly where it should be. "Leanne," the trees whispered in unison, in a sort of rustling choir of female voices. "Do it," they urged. "End this." "I'm scared," she whispered back. "I don't like this." "We know," they replied, "but you must. Set yourself free. Set us all free." Leanne gulped down a mouthful of bile that threatened to explode from her as, shaking, she fished around in the undergrowth for the right stick. Something sharp and certain. There. She extracted a perfect dagger-like branch, which was seemingly bitten from its source. She walked 3 times around the stone, all the time keeping her eyes on the heart. It pulsed faster now, as if it knew she was there, but it had no fingers to drag itself across the stone, no toes to scurry into the undergrowth. Leanne stopped on her 3rd circumnavigation, standing behind the stone and looking down the Holloway, lifting her head to the flickering light and raising her arms, the branch held tight in both fists. Her knuckles were white with effort as she plunged the dagger branch into the throbbing organ. It tore open, splattering her with fresh blood, wheezing and slumping into stillness. It looked just like meat now, and nothing more. Leanne felt an immense, almost orgasmic sense of relief, and then a whirring sound issued from behind her. A crow, beady-eyed, alighted on the stone and began to peck at the silent heart. It was then that Leanne lost consciousness, toppling like a felled sapling. She awoke, who knows how much later, by the side of the road, beside the blackberry bush. Leanne's face, neck and arms were covered in tiny scars as if she'd run blindly through the wooded trail, but she had no memory of that. And now the image of the murdered heart was fading too, like a dream banished by the morning. She felt strangely refreshed, yet glad nobody was there to witness her mysterious collapse and reawakening. Leanne picked herself up, brushing crisp leaves from her hair and cobwebs from her face. She looked down at her pale blue running top, which was speckled with red. Some of the liquid hadn't yet seeped fully between the weave of the synthetic fabric. Leanne put her pinky into a droplet and raised it to her mouth. Blackberry juice, mostly sweet, but also a little sour. So, hope you enjoyed that rather strange little tale. It's actually set in a real place, believe it or not, somewhere I discovered just outside of the town of Ide. A very weird little gully that I found by accident whilst looking for a footpath. There was no bleeding heart, however. Sorry to spoil that for you. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the story. Remember, you can buy my book, Running Coyote and Fallen Star. And I'll see you again very soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.